Yeah.
Om Sri Krishna Parabrahmane Namaha. In one's life, sometimes big egos possess little ears. How can we define in this regard? Let us start with prayer. Shri Rama Rama Rameti Rame Rame Manorame Sahasranama Tatulyam Ramanama Varanane. It does not take much to really listen, and everybody wins. Properly listening also shows an element of respect in that, however, many distractions there may be around us, notifications on our smartphones. For example, we have chosen to focus all our energies on this one person and on what they are saying at that moment in time. How do you feel when someone really listens to you, compared to when somebody is flicking on their phone while supposedly talking and listening to you? Or have you been in a business meeting where the objective was to discuss some points together and then someone ends up talking for the whole meeting, not giving anyone else a chance? The lack of respect for others present combined with a total absence of self-awareness and emotional intelligence is astounding in these cases, but such situations are not uncommon. According to great psychologist Sigmund Freud, whom we always remember, the psyche structured into three parts: the id, ego, and superego. Each part develops at different stages in our life. When comes into practical, usually the one with big ego may have following traits: never compromise even if it is healthy and mutual benefit, not accepting failures, and always defensive. Third, negative comparison with others as competitors. Next, ever craving for respect and recognition from others. Next, always showcases own strengths, plus points, achievements, accomplishments, etc. Next, never sincerely accept and respect others and achievements of others. Next, never sincerely acknowledge other contributions. Next, never sincerely thankful and grateful to the contributors. In the Bhagavad Gita, you will find two types of references to ego. One in a subjective sense as I am, and the other in an objective sense as a reference to the individuality or the sense of self. For example, when Arjuna says, Katam Bhishmamaham Sankhe Dronam cha Madhusudana, which means, How I am going to attack Bhishma and Drona in the battlefield. O Madhusudana, O Lord Krishna, he is using aham in the subjective sense to refer to himself. However, when Krishna says, Nirmamo nirahankaraha sashanti madigacchati, which means those without the sense of ownership and egoism attain peace. He is referring to aham in an objective sense of as egoism. The word aham appears in the Bhagavad Gita numerous times, mostly in a subject sense. Sometimes it appears in association with the words such as nigraham, which means self-control or self-restraint, the ego. The word is also hidden as a suffix in many other words to denote aspects of subjectivity or individuality. For example, agraham, anger, dukkham, sorrow, sukham, happiness, graham, grasping one, and purusham, individual self. There are two types of selves. The self is universal, eternal, one, and without divisions. The expansive or exalted feeling that I am everything and I am all this does not constitute egoism. However, the feeling that I am so and so or I have this and that constitute egoism called ahankara. When the universal self is covered with the impurities of delusion and ignorance, it develops this limited view of itself as a separate entity, which we recognize as ego. Thus, the ego is the feeling of separateness, the sense of duality, or the idea of being distinct and different from others. It is the false perception of oneself as a separate being or a limited being. Egoism in all of us as individual consciousness. It is a universal feeling. Ahankara is that which is shaped by egoism. It manifests in us in several ways, such as the following. 1. Ownership and doership. 2. Desires and attachments. 3. Pride and arrogance. 4. Self-esteem. 5th. Selfishness. 6th. Self-centeredness. 7th one. Aggression and competitiveness. 8th. Judgment, opinions and criticism. 9. Identification with the mind and body. 10. Fear, suffering, anxiety, anger, stress and so on. Okay. In a limited sense, aham also means pride or arrogance. However, it is rather an effect of ego or a sign of egoism. When a person is overly proud and conceited, we say he has a lot of aham, mean ego, means he is very egoistic. Any feeling, thought, idea, expression, action, or response which arises in a state of duality or the predicate state of subject and object as ego as its source. In worldly life, you cannot live without it. You need it to assert yourself, survive, and succeed. However, in spiritual life, it becomes a barrier to liberation, salvation, moksha. In Shaivism, it is referred to as anava, meaning atomicity or acting like an atom. Egoism makes a living being feel separate and small. Hence, the expression. The ego is a universal phenomenon. Everyone has an ego. Even gods and the highest Ishvara has it. Whoever manifests or becomes distinguished from Brahman as a being has it. Only Nirguna Brahman has no ego. Everyone else, including Saguna Brahman, has it. However, its nature varies from being due to the predominance of gunas. It is the purest in Ishvara, the Lord of the universe, or the manifested Brahman, since in him it is made up of the purest sattva, whereas it is the most impure in the asuras and beings of the darker worlds. Our egos are mixed with light and darkness. Hence, our behavior and conduct also vary. Another, the Bhagavad Gita on ego and egoism. The subjective and objective aspects of ego are personified in the Gita as Krishna and Arjuna. Lord Krishna personifies the universal self or the impure ego, consciousness, which is responsible for the atomicity or feelings of separation and individuality. Any suffering or any feeling or emotion that we experience, even a little disturbance or discomfort, is due to ego. In the perceptual world, it is source of all our knowledge. Perceptionness, feeling, and experience. In truth, it is but a reflection of the self only, which is the purest reality or pure consciousness. However, because it remains enveloped by the nature's impure realities, of which the mind and go are part and form of the ego consciousness, one acts like an individual and a limited entity. Arjuna's suffering is because of his limited knowledge, his sense of separatedness, his identification with his body rather than his soul, his belief that he is a doer of his actions, and his anxiety about the result of his action. Because of its limited knowledge, the ego is usually ignorant and confused. These qualities are reflected in Arjuna's suffering and his ego. Indeed, in everyone it is the ego which is responsible for suffering, anger, fear, doubt, desire, attachment, etc. According to Bhagavad Gita, the egoism is an aspect of the eightfold division of lower divine nature, which is made up of the five elements: the ego, the mind, and the reason. It is a part of the physical reality, the kshetra or field, why egolessness is a part of the knower of the field or the pure consciousness. The ego makes us believe that we are the doers of our actions and responsible for them. Because of that, we engage in desire-ridden actions and desire for their fruit, whereby we incur karma and remain bound to this mortal world. As Bhagavad Gita states, all types of actions are performed by the gunas which arise from nature. Deluded by the ego, the being thus thinks, I am the doer. Thus, ego is a deluded belief that I am responsible for everything. From the scriptural and spiritual perspective, it is a form of impudence or arrogance. The Bhagavad Gita suggests that if you think I am eternal, universal self, and live accordingly, your actions do not bind you. However, if you think I am this person with this name and form, and perform actions with the selfish and limited notion, they will bind you. Therefore, it is better to stabilize your identity in the universal self rather than in youth or your limited ego in the purest ego of God. Your life will be taken over by God Himself and He becomes responsible for all your actions. It is affirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, which recommends contemplation upon God as the effective method of accomplishment, the solution. Let us find some solution in this regard. From the above, it is clear that the solution to the problem of ego or bondage is self-evident in the Bhagavad Gita. You can escape from the mortal existence when you renounce your egoism and develop a universal vision of oneness and unity in which you will not hold on to any limited belief, judgment, or perception. You renounce everything that separates us from the universal consciousness or acts as a hindrance. The ideal which is presented in the scripture to illustrate it's an adopted yogi who is pure in his heart, who has controlled himself and conquered his senses, sees himself in all beings and all beings in himself. Thereby, he is not tainted. If you identify yourself with the universal self, overlook the duality and divisions of the world, and even vaguely cultivate with the whole existence, it is a good start. In itself, it is a great sacrifice in which your All life and actions become a continuous offering. There are two aspects to you. One is the real you, and the other is projected you. Which is the sum of your name and form. The world knows you are everything. Projected you, it does not know the real you because it is hidden. When two people meet, what they see in each other is that projected selves. On the top of it, they also wear numerous masks whereby no one can really know anyone in the truth. We really live in a world of projections and apartments, etc. The people we must or not want, whatever the really are both literally and figuratively. Even after you spend a lifetime with them, you will not know them fully. Our unity is an illusion. Our relationships are fragile. No wonder the followers of non-dualism argue that the world is an illusion. The world itself is a projection of God, and the people who live in it are also projections. The real you is your time self, which is eternal and imperishable. The projected you is your physical self and perishable and limited. Your progress on the path of liberation depends upon path how to step. It will continuously. And your progress on path of liberation depends upon how you reconcile them and bring them into an alignment. The projected you can become a problem if it goes by its natural prosperity to become involved with the world. Hence, the Bhagavad Gita cautions the seekers of liberation to harmonize and integrate their personalities to avoid falling into the trap of delusion. The projected self alone is a friend as well as enemy of the self. The self is a friend of him who has conquered it and an enemy who has not. Restraint of the ego, nigraham, is a threshold, therefore important to experience. Peace of mind and self absorption, samadhi. As Lord Krishna states, the one who has conquered the self says peacefully in the company of God, he becomes wonder equal to dualities of life such as heat and cold, pleasure and pain, honor and dishonor. He attains a peace giving them all. Desires and attachments and experience life and without ownership and egoism. When one develops a discernment between the true self-centered and the projected self, the ego takes a back seat and lets the self become the center of one's life. This is the state of egolessness as well as the pure state of spiritual life. In the state of yoga, he transcends his limited vision and prosperous life. Even performed desirelessness also went in vain. At the same time, you see and experience. The concept of seems to be stretched too far when we first also read about it. But when we honestly study over our own lives, we can clearly isolate or episodes of how this tendency manifests in itself. The events can range from simple actions on which football team is the best to intense debates in boardrooms on the next important decision is for the organizing the ego is mastery. One of the greatest dangers of progressive work is that the ego tempts to sidestep deep introspective work by leaping into a self righteousness advancement too soon. This is because the ego fancies itself as more and advance from the itself actually is. How many rational decisions made by heads of state have caused havoc in the lives of millions of people? The Bhagavad Gita present perception is to combat this creativity enemy within us is create a culture of introspection and self-knowledge. Whole basic components of life, courage and humility, a healthy skepticism of our own goodness, combined with an unending desire to learn more about ourselves. They work as powerful radars that uncover the camphor of ego and disarm it. Real self knowledge is an invaluable guardian against the self deception mechanisms of the ego, and any true and beneficial culture of transformation will teach us this. And the more we practice this awareness, the more we can realize that it is not systems that are good or evil. Rather, it is our egocentric adoption of those systems that we need to explore before we make these judgments. Ego is a major obstacle in the path of man's worldly and spiritual happiness. Since the seed of ego is present at the very birth of man, ego is invariably present in everyone, be it young or old, rich or poor, educated or uneducated, etc., to a lesser or greater extent. Ego is akin to the weeds in a field. Until the weeds are uprooted completely, we cannot cultivate a good crop. The weeds have to be uprooted regularly. Similarly, it is not possible to obtain God's grace without complete destruction of one's ego. So, ego is deeply ingrained in man that though the very objective of sadhana is destruction of ego, it is not easy to eliminate it quickly even after performing spiritual practice. Hence, instead of thinking that ego will be dissolved automatically by performing spiritual practice, we should make conscious efforts towards destroying ego. Awareness of the existence due to the physical body or due to samskaras in the centers of linga deha, like temperamental characteristics, desires, likes and dislikes, etc., is termed as impure ego. Depending on the thoughts and emotion, this ego can be either sattvic, rajasic or tamasic. With regard to intellect, ego in the Kali Yuga, we can say that complete development of intellect implies considering yourself as the body. Shri Kantai Kalyananade Nadetram Shri Venkatanivasaya Srinivasaya Mangalam Mangala Sasanaparayarmadacharya Purogamai Sarvesha Purvairacharya Satkutayastu Mangalam.